welcome to Vibration, where I empower individuals to speak their distinct truth, passions, and personal message on a global online stage. I'm your host, Michelle McDonald, passionate author, speaker, and entrepreneur. And tonight, as a writer, I am excited to welcome on a fellow author and writer, especially from the Bahamas. Words have this incredible ability to rejuvenate, restore, connect, and bring about profound change. My speaker tonight is Elle Clarke, who is from the beautiful islands of the Bahamas, representing us here, and I truly appreciate her presence. In connection with our theme, Representation Matters, Faces of the Caribbean, we are talking on the topic of abundance, empowerment, and embracing your inner queen. Elle Clarke is the innovative CEO and founder of ECM Global, a multifaceted company that provides top notch services in the areas of media, coaching, and speaking. As a best selling author, accomplished motivational speaker, and coach, she is known for her leadership in the empowerment movement, particularly as the founder of I Am Queen Ministry. Elle's personal journey as a sexual violence expert and survivor of molestation and rape has transformed her into an encourager, inspiring countless women to overcome their past traumas and turn their pain into profit. Her passion is to help women embrace their stories, mend their wounds, and unleash their inner queen to achieve their dreams and live in abundance. Elle has been featured in various media outlets, including the Huffington Post, where she contributed as a writer. Her best selling author feat was captured through the book How I Escaped the Prison of Rape, as well as several children's books. Elle is married to D'Angelo Clarke, and together they are the proud parents of four beautiful daughters. Elle, welcome to the stage tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be a part of this.
Yes, I am very, very excited to be talking about women's empowerment and, of course, you being able to do so much through your own personal journey and story. So, before all of these accolades and meeting these many women around the world, what was the inspiration that inspired and was the catalyst of your journey?
Well, I've told this story so many times, but I remember when I was in the fifth grade. I remember this so like it was yesterday, so vividly. I said, I'm going to write a story. I'm going to write a story of my life, and it's going to change the world. Now, at that time, I didn't know what I was asking for. I didn't know that I would have to walk through molestation. I didn't know that I would have to walk through rape. I didn't understand completely what my declaration was, I guess, opening me up to. But I walked through all those things. And I remember after the rape, a few years after the rape, the Holy Spirit said, you know what, you're going to write a book about your journey. And I think it was about 7 years after that happened, I had already began writing my book. But the Lord told me, you know what, I don't want you to release the whole thing. I want you to release only the portion about the rape. I sat down, I spoke with my husband, just to make sure he was okay with it. And he agreed, and I released how I escaped the prison of rape. That story was, by the time I released that story, I'd already been healed from it. Because sometimes, there are times when God may want you to speak through your healing, and there are some times when He may want you to sit and wait till you're healed and then speak about it. And that's where I was at with that particular part of my life. And at the time when the incident happened, I wasn't saved. I didn't understand what was going on. I couldn't see the Romans 8 and 28 of that situation. I couldn't see the all things will work together for good for them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. I didn't understand it then. And I do believe that if I did write a book then, that was going to be something that's just going to be talking about pain and heartache. And just this past weekend, I was a part of a pop-up shop and a lady bought my book and she said, I don't want to buy this if this is just going to make me sad, because this is already powerful just by the title. And I told her when I wrote that book, I was in total freedom. And so the book it tells of my story, but it also tells about how I was able to journey through it and how I was able to overcome it. And so the story doesn't end sad, it ends in a voice of victory. And that's kind of how
Yes.
it started.
Excellent. I love that feeling of victory. And, it was so bold and transparent for that lady to walk up to you and just be honest, just to be like, you know what, the title alone is drawing me in, but I need to know, is this going to be worth my investment? Because I want to read it, but I want to understand, what is it that you captured in this gift of a book? And you were able to let her know where you were at that time, and to be able to freely talk about that in a way that she could appreciate that and also learn more through the book.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
I also appreciate the fact that you knew exactly where you were when God spoke to you about the book.
Mhm.
You knew exactly where you were, where you wanted to be, and you identified the fact, as you stated, that sometimes we have to heal first, but other times we have to wait. And sometimes that waiting portion can feel so long and so painful at the same time.
That is so true. Because I remember after the incident happened, after the rape happened, because I remember being so confused and thinking, Lord, when I was a child, I was molested. Like, why are you allowing my body to be used and abused for a man's amusement? These were some of the questions that I asked myself. And I remember being in the shower and I was not saved at the time. And I almost cursed God, because I was like, God, because this is what I heard in the shower. I had never heard God's voice before. And this is what I heard. I heard, because you were able to bear it and share it. That's all I heard. Because you were able to bear it and share it. And at that time, I did not understood what that meant. But as time progressed, and by the time I was healed and he asked me to produce the book, I now understand why he said I was able to bear it and share it, because there are a lot of women that have lost their minds because of that. There are a lot of women that committed suicide because of the rape. There are a lot of women that are no longer themselves because of the trauma they experienced. But I am still here in my right mind and being completely healed and being able to tell the story, not with a tear in my eye. And even if you do see a tear, it's simply because I am so grateful that God delivered me out of that situation, because I could have been a dead woman that night. My 5-month-old daughter could have been a dead woman that night, but God granted us the grace to see another day. And because he did that, and by the time I gave my life to him, I realized that I could not be quiet about this, that I could not be silent. I needed other women to understand that they're not the only one going through this. Because a lot of times, especially with sexual assault victims, we think that no one understands because no one has walked that road, because a lot of people aren't sharing their stories. Because I was trying to look for a book, I was trying to look for someone. Now I need you to understand that I did get counseling. I went to a licensed therapist, I went to my pastor, I spoke with family and friends, but none of them were able to give me a real answer. I had to go to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords for him to break this down for me. And even though I didn't completely understand it then, it's everything has already come full circle, so I understand it now, that God used here. Now, let me clarify something. God did not cause the rape. And here's what I'm going to tell you guys. Listen to me. When before that happened, I was not saved, but I was getting warnings. Where you feel something, you say something tell me don't sleep home that night, or something tell me I
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't do that. Like all in me that whole week, something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it, I couldn't articulate it. And I also had a dream, right? I had
Mm-hmm.
this dream where I was sleeping in my bed and this man with a knife came in my room. And just how I had that dream is exactly how it happened. So I know that God was warning me a long time ago, but because I was being stubborn and I wanted to stay in the place where I was paying rent, I allowed myself to find myself in that situation. Because a lot of times, before you are able to heal from anything, you have to first admit, were there any missteps on your behalf? And there were, because I know that I was being warned. I just was being stubborn. And now that he allows, so okay, now I'm walking through this thing, he didn't leave me. He didn't leave me at that point. Even though I was disobedient, he kept me. He kept telling me he loved me. He kept putting his arms around me, even though I was unable to articulate it. But because I have my right mind, I know now that God was with me through and through that situation.
I love that. Yes. And it is such a unique feeling to feel comforted, to know that you are not alone. And this is such a special message to share, especially for women that have had a similar experience. And as you stated, acceptance,
Yeah,
acknowledgement is the first step. And for many, they cannot even put it into words.
that's
It's
true.
just too painful.
That is so true because a lot of times, especially with sexual assault victims, because well, I'm a victor. I don't call myself a victim anymore because I'm not a victim of my circumstance. I'm a victor of my circumstance.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times we try to forget that it actually happened, and we think, and we really suppress those thoughts, and we think because we have forgotten about it that, you know what, we can move on with our lives. But a lot of times we don't realize that that thing that we're suppressing, it is kind of controlling our decision making. It is
Yes.
controlling the way we behave. It is controlling the way we act. Even
Hmm.
though we try to suppress it and act as though it didn't happen, it is controlling us. And because we have that locked up on the inside, it kind of creates this box in our heart. We put this wall around our heart. We don't want anyone to come in. And so, because you're not allowing anybody to come in, you can't experience love. You can't experience freedom because you've put this wall around your heart. And it is simply because you fail to let it go. I'm not saying this as though this is easy, because it took me about 7 years to get over that situation. It took me a long time to forgive the person that raped me, and I did forgive him. And listen, God put me to the test. I was a police officer when I was raped, and after the incident, I was still living in Nassau, but eventually I got transferred on the island. And I remember there was a time that I had to come to Nassau and I had to work the station. I think I was pregnant with my second daughter, and I actually had to come face to face with my attacker while
Oh.
I guess what at one of the
Oh.
stations that I was attached to. And at this point, normally when I would see him, because before being transferred, he was on bail, and I, for some reason, we would always buck somewhere. I would see him standing on a street corner or in a store. For some reason, I always saw him, and every time I saw him, I would cry. I would be out of my mind. I couldn't even focus. But this particular time when I saw him, and was at the point where I said I forgave him. Because listen, by your words, you'll be justified and condemned. And so God will put you to the test to see if you have truly
Mhm.
forgiven that person. And I came face to face with him. And this time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hatred. I literally was able to see the little boy in him that was crying out, the little boy who probably was abused, the little boy who was too hurting himself. And I no longer felt hatred for him. I felt compassion for him. And that's when I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I actually forgave this person. And sometimes when I tell this story, people are like, how could you? I'm not saying that this was overnight. This was
Yeah.
no overnight thing, my dear. This was something that took years and years and years for me to understand what forgiveness did for me. And it freed me because after the incident, after I'd already been raped, he still had me in a prison. He
Mhm.
still had me in a prison. In my mind, I was scared to go anywhere. I was locking, double checking, looking over my shoulder. I was always nervous. I didn't want to sleep in a house by myself. He still had me in a prison because of what happened. And I no longer wanted to be like that. And like I said, it took a long time, but I eventually got to the point where I could say with all assurity that I truly forgive him.
Wow, powerful story, Elle. Powerful. You went through emotional leaps and bounds to reach that point, and it says a lot about your level of maturity to be able to see yourself through those phases. So you identified the fact that I've seen him multiple times and I wasn't ready. It was still impacting me, and in my mind, it was no way forgiveness was going to happen, but you did reach a point and you were able to identify it in the moment where it's like, I've released it. I've chosen to release this, but I'm actually at the point where I can do this comfortably.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely, definitely. It's not easy, but with Christ, it's doable. Definitely.
absolutely. And I really love the fact that you mentioned that when certain things happen to us as women, we hold on to these as our only story. So this is the only personal narrative that we believe. It shapes how we see ourselves, our core values, and we miss that opportunity knowing that we can change that. And through your story, we know for a fact that this is possible.
It's definitely possible. And even like with sexual assault victims or victors, this plays a serious it has a serious impact on your relationships
Yeah.
with the opposite sex, whether it's your boyfriend, your husband. It will play on you, and this is why it is so important for you to let it go. Do what you need to do. Get the counseling. If you need to do some self-care, go on day trips alone, but you have to do the work. Because for a very long time in my life, I looked at sex as a tool that men use to control women. Because you have to understand that because I experienced it as a child, and I was, very vulnerable. I was unable to defend myself. I didn't feel like anyone was there to defend me. I grew up in with the mindset of being, you know what? I'm going to take control of my life. I'm an independent woman. I don't need this. I don't need no man. I don't need this. And it really it had a negative impact on me as it relates to relationships, because I was to a point, and I'm still, listen, I've been married for 12 years, and I'm still um trying to understand femininity. Because when you have been attacked and you feel like you have to be the superhero, and you feel like you have to protect yourself, you now take on that masculine energy. You now take it on, and it's be kind of hard for you to go back to the original design of a woman to be feminine, because there's power in femininity. But at that time, I thought femininity was weak. I thought in order for you to be strong, you needed that masculine energy, but that was the enemy twisting and turning things all around. And this is why it is so important for offenses victims or survivors to understand how this thing will affect your whole life. It's not something that you can suppress. It's not something that you can forget about, because even though you believe you've forgotten about it, the actions that you take, the decisions that you're making even now, if you really take stock of what you're doing, it can be you can see that the things that you're doing is based on what happened to you all those years ago, because you refuse to deal with it.
Absolutely. And I really like that you brought that forward, because sometimes in suppressing, choosing to forget, we make these subconscious decisions about our lives and our bodies and even other women. And we find ourselves projecting and we have no idea, where is this coming from? Why do I feel this way? Why am I judging her?
Yeah.
Why do I feel as though I don't ever want to be in a relationship? Where is this coming from? And so even from this conversation, it is pulling this out of those women so they can understand and see themselves differently.
That's so true. That's so true. Because sometimes we really think like a lot of the things that we're doing and the decisions that we're making are based on things that happened in the past that we've suppressed, and sometimes suppressed it so much so that we have forgotten about it. Subconscious is still there, but we have done it. We have told ourselves this lie over and over and over until the point that we have started to believe it, and
Yeah.
that really can be detrimental to your health and to your well-being and to your relationship. So we got to get to a point where we listen. You can't change the past. That's one
Hmm.
thing we cannot do. We can't get that time back. That's another thing that we cannot do.
Hmm.
But why are you going to allow that small window of time? Because to be honest, they probably were only in my house for about, I don't know, 30 minutes. But in that 30 minutes, they took about 7 years of my life,
Yes.
because the only thing I could think about was what happened. Why me? Why did I have to go through this? Until I got to a place in God and understanding, listen, are you going to allow them to continue to rape you, because they're raping you in your mind every time you continue to think about it, because you're thinking about it so much, because there's no closure. You haven't dealt with it. You haven't dealt, so it's playing in your mind. You're trying to suppress it, but it's going to come up. You watch a show and you see someone being raped, the feelings come right back all over again. You go and you hear a story on social media about a woman who was abused, the story comes back up in your head again. It's like no matter how you try to suppress it, because we're so connected now, and with social media, those stories are going to be in your face every single day. And every time you see something that resembles your story, you're going to think about it. It's going to hurt you again. You're going to cry. You're going to outburst. You're going to lash out. Because for me, everyone finds, I guess, has something that they do when they're upset. And with me, it was for me to get over it at the time. I just was spending all my money on expensive things, going in the Gucci store, buying Tony and Berg, David Yurman. I just was going in debt because, and I was crying out. People didn't see that. That's why I don't judge. Listen to me. When I see young girls acting out, especially sexually, listen, go talk to that baby. Because
Yeah.
more times than not, she is actually crying out for someone to just to see that she's going through something. Probably someone touched her or something is going on. Because a lot of times we throw these young girls away. Oh, she's fresh. She being this way. Why is she that way?
Yes.
Why is she doing that? That's a signal that she is acting out. And for me, my acting out was, I listen, I me and my mom, we couldn't get along for nothing, because I didn't understand at the time, why didn't you defend me? I felt as though, when I was younger, when I was molested, this is what I'm talking about. I felt as though a parent should protect the child. And I
Mhm.
couldn't understand for the life of me why this lady didn't protect me. And I was rude to her. I was disgusting to her. And that was me lashing out because I couldn't understand why no one protected me. And so a lot of times when you see young girls, don't cast them to the side. When you see them acting out, or you have stories where they're running away, or they're here and there, you need to have a conversation with them, because they
Yeah.
may be going through something that they can't articulate with words. And so they're displaying these actions, but because they really want someone to talk to them, but because no one seems to care, they are displaying these actions that really ain't becoming of a young lady, but no one is there to care for them.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. I am sure that there is someone in our audience who can appreciate what you stated as well, because we can feel the energy from others. And there are times that we sense things and we may not say anything about it, but there are a lot of young women, young girls who are hurting.
Yes.
And if you don't pick up on the signs,
Yeah.
they will continue on the cycle. But the beautiful thing is that we all have the ability to help and
Yes.
take notice. Sometimes one hug, one
Yeah.
touch, one, how are you? There's
Yeah.
so much power in that one question. And that can really help someone to just open up and feel seen and feel heard. And like, I matter. Today, I feel like I matter in this moment.
That is so true. That is so true. One hug can do a lot. That is so true.
Absolutely. Another thing is that you mentioned that when it comes to having that experience of sexual assault, especially when it comes to the Afro Caribbean society, there's a lot of shame and guilt connected. And so we lose ourselves. As you stated, it's very cultural, it's also very sexist, and it can be difficult to regain who we are as an individual and as a woman.
That is so true. My experience, I think I had it quadruple hard, because what was unique about my experience is the fact that I was a detective. I investigated rape. So let me walk you down this aisle of shame that I had to walk through. I was a detective. I worked in the area, well, at the detective unit. So my matter had to go through my colleagues, which means that they had to collect evidence, which means that they had to collect my underwear, which means that they had to collect pubic hairs. And these were people that I had to work with, or I worked with every single day. Not only did I have to walk through that, I also had a 5-month-old daughter. While everyone else had the opportunity to run away or to hide, I literally had to face it. Like, I didn't have a choice. I did not have a choice, because at the time when the rape happened, there were a lot of rapes going on. This was like a spree in the area that I was living in. And out of all those cases, I was the only one willing to testify.
Wow.
the only one willing to testify and did testify against them. And so even though they had all these cases, because none of them were willing to testify, it like I felt like the burden was all on me to show up, not only for me but for the other women as well. And so after I came off administrative leave, sorry, I had to go back to work in the same department with the exact same people who just collected all of my personal items
Girl.
and I had to hear the rumors. Oh, if I was her, I would never come back to work. I would never show my face. Oh, if I was her, I would ask for a transfer. Oh, if I was her, I would do this and that. And I remember when I came back to work, they moved me out of the section that I was in and they put me in the statistical section because at the time, I was upset about it, but at the time, my boss thought it would be better for me to not work with serious crimes and for me to work, you know, just with the books, with the numbers, the statistics. In that moment, that's when I lost all of my love for the police force. Here's why. Because here I am now doing something that I love. And the guy that raped me is now controlling my destiny at work. He's now controlling my career because he broke into my house and raped me. I can no longer investigate the crimes that I love to do because of what he did to me, not because of something I did, but because of what he did to me. And on that day, I would never forget it. I lost all of my love and respect for the Royal Bahamas Police Force because at that time, even though to their credit, I believe that they thought that they were doing the right thing, but all that did to me was make me feel like I was being raped all over again. That's what that did to me because even after the situation, I still ended up eventually dealing with rape matters and sexual offense matters again. And I still was able to maintain that neutrality. I was still able to be neutral because here's the thing. I despise rapists, but you know who I despise just as much as rapists? People that lie and say that they were raped because you have to understand rape is one of those crimes where the victim is kind of bashed, right? But at
Yeah.
the same time, if a man or a woman is named a rapist, whether suspected or not, you could never remove that stain from your name. You
Mm-hmm.
can never, that will be on you for life. It's not even like murder or homicide or armed robbery. Yeah, you may have robbed somebody and people would still give you another chance, but a rapist, once you have that name on you, even if someone just said that willy nilly, you will never get that name off of you. And so, just as much as I hate people that rape or I hate the act of rape, I despise people who lie because with sexual offenses, that is something that is very hard to get off of your name. And so I was still able to be neutral. My situation didn't cause me to be more leaning more to the left. Every time I hear a story from a victim, no, I hear the story, I investigated the story, and I did my best in what I was doing at the time. But when they took me away from it after the incident, like I say, to their credit, they believe that they were helping me, and I appreciate that. But for me, it made me feel like, okay, now my life is, I wanted to go back to my life.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to investigate. And because I was pulled out of it, it made me feel as though I was being raped all over again.
Al, I absolutely understand your anger in that moment, the passion for reconnecting to who you were, wanting to step back and be yourself and flourish in what you loved and not lose who you were, and just trying to understand all of these different dynamics, but most importantly, standing up for yourself and who you wanted to be, how you wanted to be seen and represented. That was a lot.
Let me
And
tell you this story. My grandmother, when I first wrote the book, when she saw the book, the first thing she asked me, "Why did you put your face on this book? Why did you do that?" Now everybody's going to know. And at that point, I say, "Mama, I'm putting my face on this book because with sexual offenses matters, the victim's name is never called. The victim, she is protected. The courts and the police, they do their best to protect her identity, and for good reason.
mhm,
Normally, the courtrooms is a closed courtroom. Just the people that need to be there are normally in the room, and that's to protect the victim. And listen, I appreciate it. But a lot of times I believe that we lose the victim's voice because we do that as well. Because she doesn't have a voice, because she doesn't have a face, no one is able to see her and she's not telling a story. We listen only to what the male is saying or what the accused is saying because he's the only one speaking. He's the only one's face that we see. He's the only one's voice that we hear. And because we and like I say, we're protecting or we're doing our best to protect her identity, to protect her dignity. We cover her and we hide her name and we call her Jane Doe and we close the courtrooms. But at the same time, because we don't know her, because we haven't heard her side of the story, we don't know what's going on. We still, if you hear it, we still lean towards the male because the only story and explanation we hear is the man's one because we are covering and we're trying our best to protect her, but at the same time we're hurting her because she no longer has a voice. She doesn't have a face. She doesn't have an identity anymore. And so I told my Grammy, I say, listen, I'm putting my face on this because we have a face. I have a name. My name is Elle Clarke. My neighbor who may have been raped or assaulted, she has a name and she may not be strong enough to expose who she is, but I have been, and I believe that I've been given the unction to function in this area. I am going to use my face that I believe God has given me to be the voice for the voiceless, because we need a voice for people who have been raped and for children that are being molested every day, not only in this country but worldwide. And a lot of times many are not strong enough, and I understand that because I was once a person who wasn't strong enough. I was ashamed that I was raped and I did nothing wrong. Listen, I don't care. I don't even care if you are on a street corner and you are half naked. If you told someone, no, do not touch me, it is not your fault. I don't care how we play it. This is your body. This is, you say no. If you're not interested, no means no. I was in my home. My house had an alarm system. They got through that. I was sleeping in my bed and I was still attacked. So what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? So why should I hide behind something that they did to me when they're the accused? I'm not the accused. I am the victim that has now become the victor. And so I put my face on that book for the world to see, because I am not hiding behind something that I did not cause to happen to myself. I am not hiding behind him. I'm not hiding behind the pain. I'm letting women and men who have been assaulted know, listen, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely. Very powerful reminder for men and women, as you stated, to know that you can flourish after this experience. There is more of a life out there for you. You will not cease to exist. You can be victorious in all ways. And in speaking on this, how exactly can women unleash their inner queen and find empowerment after an experience like this?
You first have to admit that it happened. I know it sounds silly for you as the person that experienced this devastating situation to have to admit to yourself that it happened, but you have to first admit to yourself that it happened to you, and you have to realize that it is not your fault. I don't care what the situation or circumstance was, it is not your fault. One of the things the Holy Spirit told me to do, and I thought it was silly at the time, he told me to look into a mirror and he said, I need you to say everything you're hurting about. I need you to tell me everything. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, Lord, that don't make no sense though. Like, I am telling myself what happened to me. I know what happened to me. Why do I need to look in the mirror and tell myself? He said, no, I need you to see yourself and I need you to speak to yourself and say everything that happened to you. So I began, and I was like nonchalant about it at first. And I started to say, well, this happened, that happened, that happened. And then as I continued, I realized that there was so much hatred I had for so many people, for my parents, for different people, things that I had suppressed deep down in my soul. And the tears started to come out because everything that was in me started to come out. All of the anger, the resentment, the rejection I felt started to come up. And then I just wept and wept and wept. And the Lord said, this is why. Because you first have to recognize the things that you are going through, the things that you are dealing with. And you got to verbalize it, because the only way you could get forgiveness is by asking for it. And so you have to verbalize that thing. And so when I start to hear myself speak and everything come up out of me, I was like almost outside, having a out of body experience, because now it was like I was listening to myself, even though I was also speaking, because I didn't realize that I was holding on to so many things, even as a child. I thought I had gotten over those things, but I didn't. All I did was suppress it. And so the first thing I did was look in the mirror like the Holy Spirit suggested and begin to just talk about and say all the things that happened to me, and everything that I was suppressing began to come out. After that, listen, I had to link on to God. Now I know that listen, I whatever your religion is, whatever your belief is, I respect it, and I would hope that you would respect mine. And I can only share what happened for me and how I was able to get through it. And so I had to rely on God heavily. I had to rely on Him heavily, because I could not articulate, even though I know Romans 8 and 28, and that's now my favorite scripture. I just couldn't understand this whole all things good or bad work together for your good. Like, how could a rape work together for my good? I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand how could molestation work together for my good. I just couldn't understand. I could not articulate it. So I had to go to the person that said these words, and I had to go to God and be like, you really gonna have to show me this thing. And even though I was asking him to show me it, you know what he was doing? He was dealing with me.
Yes.
He was dealing with me, because a lot of times when we pray for things externally to get better, he is really trying for things internally to get better. You pray for all these external things, he need to deal with the internal things, because a lot of time when we change our perspective, a lot of the things that we thought was not all that good, you may start to see it in a different light, and you may realize that maybe it was me, and maybe not so much what was going on the outside, but because of how I was looking and because my glasses were dirty, I wasn't able to see clearly. And so whenever you ask him to deal with them, he can deal with you first, and then you're going to see what happens next. And so he started to deal with me internally, and he was dealing with me from trauma from a child into adulthood, and things that I even didn't even think was connected. But that's where he showed me that a lot of the things that happened to you, your decisions came out of that. The way that you interacted with others, the decisions that you made, the persons that you were in a relationship with were based on that traumatic experience that you experienced as a child that you never got over. And so after God dealt with me, and I started to read his word, really get into the church, and really, and it's not just about going to church, because you have to understand that we all have to read the Bible for ourselves. I didn't depend on a pastor to bring me inspiration. I dig in that Bible. Because I needed it. I needed to be free from this. I didn't want to be mad anymore. I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't want to have unforgiveness. I wanted change for real. So I had to dig in that. I dig in that Bible myself, and I went to church. Church was only a supplement. It was only a supplement to what I was doing already. I didn't go there to expect something. I went there already had received, and just going there for confirmation. See, a lot of times we put too much emphasis on the church when we really should be spending quality time with God, like we do with our family, our children, our husbands. We need to spend the same amount of time with God, so that he'll be able to show us exactly, give us a personal word and show us who we are. And when you go to church, the only thing you should be getting is confirmation. The only thing you should be getting is confirmation. And so with church, that also helped me. And then I kept up with it, kept up with prayer, with fasting, looking at myself. Whenever I had those feelings again, listen, there were times when I still broke down and cried. There were times when I still was afraid. There were times, but I kept on saying, God, you tell me you can make Romans 8 and 28 a reality in my life. And I had to hold on to that. I held on to that scripture. And eventually, after the situation, I got married. Then eventually I began writing the book. And even when I started to write the book, because for me, from I was a child, writing was always my therapy. I loved writing. Writing was all, my mother would tell you, like, I have books and books and books, just journals and just writing everything. So writing was always something that I did. And so I wrote when I was angry, happy, sad, it didn't matter. I wrote, and that's exactly what I did and continue. I still do that today. And so I wrote a lot of the things. So I already had my book written. And when the Lord asked me to release it at that time, I was afraid, because I was like, oh my goodness, I am now putting a face to this. I am now like, everybody's going to see.
Big deal.
They're going to say, oh, she was raped. Oh, look at that girl, she was raped. Da, da, da. You know, I was like, Lord, are you sure? I had to get this word from him. I couldn't. And I was like, God, if this you, then my husband's going to agree, and there's not going to be any argument. And when I went and I told him, he was like, okay, like it was like, okay. Because it was like he already knew about it. He already knew my intention. I always wanted to write a book from I was a child, when I was in the 5th grade. He already knew that I'd already written the book, right? But the Lord didn't want me to release the book. He said, just release this portion of it, and this is what you're gonna call it, and do that. And I went to him and he said, I'm fine. And when I wrote the story on social media, when I wrote the book, listen, the emails were overwhelming from women that were in marriages who never admit to their mother, their adults, or their husbands that they were pregnant.
Girl.
People like and in the Bahamas, in the US, and Canada, my inbox was overflowing. And then I did have the Nancy, the negative Nancy's as well.
Mm,
Why would you do that? And I ignored them. I completely, because I knew without a shadow of doubt that this was the Lord's doing, because otherwise that story probably would have still been locked up in my manuscript, because I still haven't released that part of the book as yet. And so I knew it was God. And so when I released it, that also began to free me even more. I was already free, but now I was able to see Romans 8 and 28 play out in my life. Now I was able to see how this is working for my good. Okay, God, you told me in the shower those 7 years or 8, 10 years ago that I was able to bear it and share it. This is what you were talking about, because I didn't understand in the shower what you were talking about me being able to bear it and share it. Yeah, I went through it and now I'm sharing. I'm not just sharing. And the thing about what I like about the book, and because the Holy Spirit wrote that for me, what I like about it is it doesn't only share the tragedy, it shares the triumph. It
yes.
doesn't only share the trial, it shares the
Trial.
victory. So that you would know this isn't just a sad story. No, I am detailing how I had to forgive, how I went through forgiveness, letting you know that this didn't take overnight. So don't be hard on yourself. Don't be hard on
Yes.
yourself. You thought you forgive
Yes.
and then you crying tomorrow. No, man, no, don't worry about that. Keep on moving forward. You could fall down today, get up today, and keep on moving forward. The problem
Yeah.
happens when we decide to sit in it, when we decide to stay stuck, when we allow it to paralyze us
Mm,
and allow it to keep us in this cycle going
yes.
over and over and over. And then you see 20 years gone down, 15 years,
Mm,
35
girl.
years gone, and you're still in the
Yes.
same position. That's when it's a problem. But every
Mm-hmm.
time you fall, get back up. And that's what I had to do. And so when I released it and I got the emails, then I started to get the speaking engagements in the US. And then people, I need you to speak here. I need to speak to this church, this youth group, this, that. Like the speaking engagements started to come. Then the connections started to come. And then I started to think about more books that I could write. And I didn't know until then that Romans 8 and 28 was a real thing. I was holding on to that word, but I didn't see that word in my life. I didn't understand how that was going to play out. All things work together for good for them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And I've seen the way, even today. I've written that book I wrote that book in 2016 or released that in 2016. And in 2023, that same book is still opening doors for me. That exact same book. And I couldn't, and I'm like, but that's an old story. That's an old, all kind of people ain't get raped, but God is still using that story. So I don't want you to look at your story and say, man, someone then tell a story. No one
Yes.
told your story. Your story is
Exactly.
unique. It is unique to you. And there are people that I could reach that you may not be able to reach. But I'm telling you, there are also people that you can reach that my story will never reach. And so this is why it's important for all of us to tell our stories. This is why it's important for us to work through it, because there are lives attached to your victory. There are lives attached to your testimony. Because when women begin to tell me about their stories, and I'm like, Lord, like I didn't even realize that I thought it was only me, because I didn't have no book to read. I didn't have no one. I was talking to people. I was talking to therapists. I talked to my pastor. I talked to family, but they never get raped. I can hear their empathy, but they don't know what I'm going through because they've never experienced it. They never had the boogeyman break into their house while they were sleeping, tucked away in their own bed. So they weren't able. I heard them, and I appreciate the empathy, but y'all don't know what I've been through.
Yeah.
And so this is why it's important for people. I don't care what you go through. Listen, your story, the Bible declares that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, which means that we overcome by the blood of Jesus and we overcome by stories like these. We
Yeah.
overcome by things that we would have walked through and came out on the winning side, because I am not special. I am just like you. The only thing different is I decided to say, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what you're doing either, but walk me through it. Walk
Yes.
me through it. Here's my hand. I can let you lead me. Take me through this time. And that's exactly what I did.
Absolutely. Girl, listen. That was a journey just now. That was a lot. You have given us so many incredible gems to walk away from, and really instructive introspective exercises that is going to help a lot of persons that have had that unfortunate experience. And one of the most deep ones is, as you stated, going in front of the mirror and admitting out loud, hearing your voice, allowing yourself to feel the words, feel the emotions, and most importantly, choosing different. You said that you had reached a point where it's like, I don't want to feel like this anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to see myself like this anymore. You use your unique story to fuel yourself,
Yeah.
and you wanted a different life. And those two things are one of the biggest things that we can walk away from to truly unleash our inner queen. As you stated, those are amazing starts. Amazing.
Glory be to God. Because it was only Him. Glory be to God.
Yes. And also knowing, as you stated, that there is victory, there is triumph. Right now, you may feel hazy, lost in confusion, and so many questions, but in understanding that at the end of it, your journey, another person's journey with a similar experience, all of us can experience that wealth of abundance, move away from scarcity, and live in abundance and empowerment. That is beautiful.
Yes.
Absolutely
To
beautiful.
God be the glory, because I give Him all of the glory. It is not by might, not by power, but by His Spirit that I'm sitting here today speaking to you. And I just want you to understand, kings and queens, because we both experience, there are many of us that we go through the exact same thing, and know that there's help. Know that God loves you, and know
Yes.
that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely. Al, you shared so much with us. If there is a man or woman right now in the audience who wants to experience empowerment and don't know where to start, what is the one thing you would say to them?
Whew, what worked for me was Jesus, because I thought I knew what I was like. I knew what I was doing. I thought I already made up my mind. I'm going to do this, and that. I'm going to be different from my family. I'm going to do this, and the more I tried not to be like the people I didn't want to be, the more I became those people. And that happens because we don't know who we are. And the only way you're able to know who you are, you have to go back to the manufacturer, not your parents. You got to go back to the originator, the source, and that is God. And He, and only He can tell you, the manufacturer is the only one who can tell you the purpose of the thing that He created. And it was only through going to Him. And thank God I had the foundation, because, like the prodigal son, and I tell people all the time, I'm a prodigal daughter. But hadn't I had the foundation, I would have nothing to go back to. I would have had nothing. I had the foundation. Grandfather preacher, Grammy carried me to church every Sunday, every 3 times a day, and I hated it then. But because of that foundation, I was able to go back to something. See, the prodigal son had something to go back to because he had a foundation. He know his father. He said, "I would rather be a servant in my father's house than to be living out here in the pig's pen." Because he knew that his father even treated the servants well, and because he had something to go back to. See, that's the part. You gotta have something to go back to, and because my grandmother and my mother sent me to church, I had a foundation to go back to, and that foundation was Christ. And I went back to Him and I said, "Lord, I did it my way. I partied. I did this. I did that. I lived my riotous life. Now I need you to help me because I'm hurting. I don't want to wake up crying anymore. I don't want to do this." And I had to surrender it all to Him. And like I said, this is no easy feat. It's easy to live how you want to live. You have no
Mhm.
boundaries. You have nothing. But when I think about it, when people ask me, why do you say, why are you resisting who you really are? But who am I? Like, who are we? Are we those impulses? That's not who we are. That is not who we are. That is not who we are. And so I had to go back to my creator, and I had to ask Him, can you still work with a wretch like me? Can you rebuild me again? And that's exactly what He did every day. And do I always get it right? Oh heavens, no. But I have to keep on my feet. I have to keep on my knees, sorry, and pray and say, "Lord, I need help with this today. Lord, I don't know how to deal with this person. You have to show me how. What's in me? You need to build patience. Okay, help me, help me, help me, help me, help me. Sometimes things happen quickly, sometimes it's a process. But you have to understand, you got to know that there's a father that loves you. He's
Mm.
the only person that probably died for you. Like, I mean, come on. When people ask me about how do you know Jesus is real, listen to me. My response is always this. I would rather, when I look at what he's asking us to do, it's only going to make me a better person. Like, I don't see anything that is against humanity or against the laws of the land. Nothing. Like, everything he's asking me to do is simply going to make me a better person, help other people. Man, we know every time we do a good deed, that makes us feel so good on the inside.
Yeah.
So how is that gonna how is that how is that gonna change you in a negative way? Is heaven and hell real? Well, I don't know. I haven't been to heaven or hell, but what I do know is I would rather believe in him and find out that it was a lie than to not believe in him and then wake up and find out that it was the truth. And
Yeah.
so what I did was go back to the creator. What I did was follow the words in that same book that was written over 2000 years ago. I listened to it. I've seen him show up in my life. I've seen him protected me. I've seen him vindicate me. I have seen his hand in my life. My pastor used to say, a man with an argument is not, a man with an experience is not at the mercy of a man with an argument. And I have experiences with God protecting me. I have experiences with God promoting me. I have the experience, so I know that he is real. And
Yeah.
so I had to go to him. I couldn't do it myself. I
Mm.
didn't have a book at the time to read either. I had to rely solely on the one that created me.
Thank you so much for that and sharing your personal journey and reminding so many that you are not alone. Find your space, find your tribe, go back to your foundation. That is where we find ourselves. You asked a very important question. Who are we? Who am I? And this is the very um, instinct type question that we all have. And we ask ourselves at different phases in our lives, and it never changes. We are
No,
constantly seeking the answer. And so, in knowing that there is a way to find that answer, to find ourselves, to reconnect to our roots, and knowing that this can help us to find and experience that empowerment that we want to have. Elle, with all of the accolades that you have, your daughters seeing your story and your journey, what is one thing that you would want them to walk away from being able to see this through their mother?
hmm, resilience,
Yes.
because they're gonna go through their own. I remember my oldest daughter is almost 18, and even leading up to her almost being 18, it's been difficult for me to realize, like, I'm going to have a young adult. Like, Lord, did I teach
Mhm.
her enough? Was I a good example? Like, is she ready for the world? Like, these are some of the things that, like, literally is still be going through my mind. But the Holy Spirit said to me, well, he used a woman of God. She was on a live, and she said, you can't be a children's testimony.
Yes.
And that hit me so hard. And she said it again. She said, you cannot be a children's testimony. They're going to have to walk through, just like you did.
Mm.
They're going to have to walk through their own trials, their own tribulations. They're going to experience their own blessings.
Mhm.
So you might as well release them to God, because he's the only one who could protect them and bring them out to the other side, just like he did it with you. And I have to replay that statement in my mind every day. And so that's why I say resilience, because we all are going to go through things that are going to hurt us. We're
Yes.
going to go through things that are going to make us excited, happy. But it's in those times when we are hurt,
Mm.
that's when we need resilience the most. And I want them to be able to say, okay, my mommy going through some hard things, but one thing I could say about mommy, no matter how hard she falls, she continues to get up. So if mommy was falling and I got that same blood in me, I am going to get up just like mommy did. That's what I want them to know, that they are resilient and they always have a place called home with me, no matter where I am, no matter how far they are. I don't care what they would have done, that they always have a home with me.
I love that. Resilience and a home. That is such a very important thing to have. A lot of people don't think about it, but as we get older, we
Yes.
always want to be able to know that home
Yeah.
is where we can find ourselves and
Yeah.
that we can be. Al, I wanted to say congratulations again on your I Am Queen ministry, your podcast, Hello Queen, launching the Bahamas' first ever Bahama Book Con, and most recently, having a meeting with the Ministry of Social Services Honorable Obi Wilcombe, and your latest, the Ultimate Children's Book Course. For the latter, I truly appreciate the fact that you are emphasizing children when it comes to reading, sharing stories that they can learn from, but most importantly, being able to see themselves. So, of course, we have to know what is next for you and how can we show our support.
I I know I am definitely going to be speaking more because there's been like this pull, and especially in the arena of sexual offenses, especially how in the Bahamas we're now in the process of amending our sexual offenses bill with all the talk about what is rape, what is constituted as rape. People are talking about
Mhm.
marital rape, but it's not really marital rape. But I believe that I'm going to be speaking a lot more, especially on the topic, because a lot of conversations are being had around sexual offenses, but there's no one who has experienced it that is actually speaking. And I think that's where the void is. It's really, really crazy for us to be creating any bill or law concerning a thing that we have no in-depth knowledge of other than what we have read or studied. It is important and crucial for lawmakers to speak with people that would have walked through it to
Yes.
get their perspective before creating any
Mhm.
law that is going to affect not only them but women that may walk through the exact same thing. And that's how the door was opened to me to social services through a very awesome friend that saw a need and called me in. And so I am grateful to her, and she knows exactly who she is. And so that's how the door was open, because they had no one who actually walked through it able to say or speak on the topic. They just had people in offices writing bills or making these decisions, but there was no voice from the person that they were actually advocating for. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to be speaking a lot more. I'm definitely going to be writing a lot more, like you said, with the children's books. I think it's important for us to, because there is important for us to ensure that our children are grounded and that they have material that's not only going to empower them, uplift them, and also going to teach them things that they'll be able to be productive and awesome citizens in the world. And this is why
Mhm.
I believe that the Lord has shifted me a lot more to children's books, because the enemy is after the children, whether we believe it or
Yes.
not. He is coming at you when you're young, because that's what he did to me. What he did was he planted a seed by the molestation. It planted a seed, and that seed could have turned out that had the ability to turn out into homosexuality. That seed could have turned into that. That seed could have turned into really me being all over the streets, being for the streets, like the young people say. That seed could have turned into me just being a terror in my own country. But what God did, because the enemy planted that seed, what God did was uproot that seed and identify the seed, allowed me to see the seed that the enemy planted so that he could uproot it in my life. And so this is why it is important for us, that the enemy is going full force after our children, people in the church, whether you listen, and this is what I have to talk about. I don't care if you're not a pastor, if you're not some leader in the church, you still have the ability to make a difference. You
Yes.
still, let us get away from titles. Let us get away from titles. Don't use the title as a way to wiggle out of your responsibility, because it doesn't matter what you do. One small act could change an entire world, because you may end up meeting someone, one child you may give a hug to, like you said, one child you may give some empowering words or inspiring words that will change their life forever. And there you have the next tech giant or the next president, prime minister. You have no clue what one word can do for someone. And so do not just depend on the people in the pulpit or in the Senate or in the House of Assembly to make a change. You have the ability to change things today. And that's what my intent is with my books. The latest book that I wrote is I, the Bahamian Princess. I remember a lot of times we believe that because we were born in a country so small that we are unable to do great things. But that is definitely not
Mhm.
the case. And we can look all around us, from sports to acting to authors to our pastors, and
Mhm.
you see Bahamians are really pushing and making noise.
Yes.
And so it doesn't matter where you are from. If God would God have for you, no man can take it away from you. I was in the Bahamas, didn't know nothing about nothing, and God lift me up and move me to the US, allow me to make connection, allow me to start I Am Queen magazine with no connections, being in offices with Essence magazine, BET, and things. I didn't know. Listen, I used to go to COB for journalism and mass communication, but I did not finish. So how did I even get in these rooms? It was nothing but the grace and the favor of God. It had nothing to do with me. And I was in the Bahamas, and all he did was pick me up, put me there. He brought me back, and he is still opening doors for me in that arena while I am home. And so I don't want you to look at yourself as small. We're from a small country. Your voice has
Mhm.
power. Your story is loud, and people need to hear what you have to say. I do not care if there are a million books on rape, a million books on molestation, a million books on divorce or marriage or having children or being a mom. Your story is unique to you, and
Yeah.
there are listening ears that are only you, that are only going to be attracted to your voice. And this is why you have to stand up. If you are someone listening to this live right now, and you know you've been feeling there's something telling you you need to write a book, something telling you need to start a podcast, there's something telling you need to do this and that, listen to me. Listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit, because that's what it is. And I need you to get started. We are in a season where God is moving. He's opening doors.
Mhm.
He's connecting dots. He's bringing people in your vicinity. But if you ain't ready, you're going to miss it. Because when I got the call to go to that meeting, and it was a very private meeting with the Minister of Social Services, I got the call 9 a.m. The meeting was 10 a.m. I had just arrived home from dropping my kids to school. I was not ready. And in a moment, I wanted to say, and I did tell her, I can't make it. She said, if you don't get dressed, I don't care what you have to do, you better get
Girl.
got dressed in less than 30 minutes, and I was down there, and I say, okay, God, I say, okay, I'm not going to miss this moment. And then that
Yes.
moment opened the door for another moment where I was able to meet the lady who was actually drafting the bill for the Sexual Offense Act. And
Wow.
so
Awesome.
God was opening the doors, but if I wasn't ready, I was going to miss
Mhm.
the moment. So I need you guys
Yes.
to be ready. That's like imagine you're being on a track. You know when they say on a mark, get set, ready, go. You are at that ready position where you're stenched up and you're ready for that go. Are you ready to hear that gun just pop for you to
Yes.
start running? That's where you are. So you have to be ready. This is your time. This is your season to speak. This is your season to open your mouth. Listen, the whole Beyonce theme of Renaissance, that's not, let me tell you something. What the enemy does is try to twist what he knows God is doing. I remember in 2020, the Lord gave me a word. He said that this is a Renaissance time. This was in 2020. He said this new
Mhm.
decade is a Renaissance. And I had to go back to what the Renaissance era was. There was change, the music had changed. Women were now being a lot more in the forefront.
Mhm.
There were immigration issues. There were a lot of drugs going on. Like everything that we're seeing now is what happened many years ago during the time of Renaissance. And I said, Lord, what are you saying about, like, what are you really saying? Renaissance is an era too where women were more vocal, where women were
Yes.
doing awesome things. And that is the season that we are in. We are in a new birth, a rebirth season, because that's what Renaissance means, rebirth. And so, what God wants to do is rebirth you. He wants to reintroduce you. He wants to brand you. He wants to take you to the nations. He wants to use your voice, your gift, your talent, your skill. But you got to be prepared. You do not want to miss this moment in time, because it
Mhm.
may not come again in your lifetime. Because if you go and research, you will see when Renaissance happened, and a lot of those, probably all, or a lot of those people are no longer with us. And so you don't know what you're going to miss in this season. So guess what?
Yes.
I would rather just do it than to wait to be perfect. Listen, God don't ask. He wouldn't give you something to do if he know you weren't capable of doing it. So you
Mhm.
might be in your head thinking, but I'm ready. I'm perfect. No, 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 no. Moses didn't think he was ready either. Moses said, man, I kill a man. Like how I could go to the Pharaoh. I stutter. How could I speak? but God still sent him, and he even sent him a helper. He sent with Aaron. And, I
Yes.
sent Aaron with you. Let Aaron help you if you feel like you're not prepared. But God knew that Moses was ready to do it. And so I am saying to you today, you are ready to do what God has called you to do. The time is not yesterday. The time is not tomorrow. The time is now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Elle. Remembering the value in our story, in
Yes.
ourselves, seeing ourselves higher than we may have thought previously because of an unfortunate event, tapping into our story, our feelings, being transparent, and reaching that other side that we can all achieve of victory and triumph. We are sorely looking forward to your upcoming projects and your speaking engagement. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of development and empowerment in the future, which is very, very good to hear. So, of course, if we want to continue to show our support to Elle for her podcast, her engagements, and also her upcoming projects, you can go to our website, www.iamqueenmagazine.com. Also, follow I Am Queen Magazine on Instagram and Facebook. And if you're interested in booking her, you can email her at hello@iamqueenmagazine.com. As a reminder, this episode is proudly sponsored by Amber L. Our guest speaker, L, has left us with so much to think about, forcing us in a good way to enter a season of rebirth, seeing ourselves intentionally differently and using our story and ourselves to impact others because we are unique and our stories are unique. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Al. And I invite everyone to join us next week for another episode of Vibration, where we raise your frequency and amplify your truth. Bye, everyone.